Thanks very much. Good morning, my name's Craig Frew and I lead on skills and supply chain development for the Scottish Government's Heat and Buildings Division. I've been working on the challenge of heat and buildings decarbonisation for around about 8 years now, and it's fantastic to see a lot of familiar faces across the audience this morning. In the government just now, my role is, as I say, is on skills and supply chain development, and I work with Karen and Josh, and there's a number of other Scottish Government colleagues here today, so please do come and say hi if you get an opportunity to do so. Thank you to Kelly and Hugh and colleagues in Scotland Excel for inviting me to speak today. When I signed up, no one told me that I was following Mr. Harvey directly, so no pressure there then. The Minister has just provided an overview of our Heat and Buildings programme, highlighting the rationale and the need for change. Obviously, we've got a broad programme of work underway across the Scottish Government on this challenge, but I've been asked to speak about supply chains development, so that's what I'll be focusing on today. I think a useful question for us to start with, and it's perhaps quite a simple question, who are the heat and buildings supply chain? We tend to talk about it as if it's a single dedicated industry, but largely it isn't. Yes, there's a number of companies who are already specialising in delivering products and services in this area, and it's great to see a number of those companies here today. I hope to speak to you later at the exhibition. But I'm often keen to remind colleagues internally that our supply chain is made up of not one, but several overlapping trades and industries who also serve wider markets for the construction and building improvement sectors. I think that's an important point to make because the construction sector as a whole is busier now than it ever has been in the past decade. The Federation of Master Builders' latest State of Trade survey revealed that builders' workloads are at their highest levels for 10 years, and demand for building fabric specialists particularly is very high, as I'm sure many of you in the room here today will know. 53% of builders have reported that they're struggling to hire carpenters and joiners, and we know of similar supply chain labour challenges in the electrician, plumbing and heating sectors. So I think with that in mind, the challenge for us all as consumers, buyers and funders of heat and energy efficiency works is to consider how we build confidence in the supply chain and make this an attractive and sustainable area for other businesses to grow into. Our upstream supply chain largely operates on a multinational level, with goods and services traded between Scotland and the rest of the world. And we've got lots of great success stories here, with Scottish-based companies like Mitsubishi Electric, Star Refrigeration and Sunamp producing products for the zero-emissions heating sector, and a number of other companies doing some really innovative and exciting stuff with regard to thermal energy efficiency, doing a lot of work with the likes of the Construction Scotland Innovation Centre. Sorry, BEST, I think it is now. So we're working with our enterprise agencies to continuously develop Scotland's upstream competitive advantage in this space, and we'll hear from Neil about that in a moment. But in the downstream supply chain, it's much more localised. In installer roles, we know that we face a significant need for expansion here. We've been working with Skills Development Scotland and Scottish Renewables to try and quantify the number of people that may be required to deliver at the pace and scale that's called for by our statutory emissions reduction targets and our strategies. Now, the chart on my screen gives an indication of the scale that may be needed. It's almost impossible to put absolute definite numbers on this. And you could view this as a very stretching challenge, but I think that it also indicates that the significant potential for us to support low regrets growth across the sector in the near term and start building momentum. So our question should be not whether that's possible, but how do we start making it happen? Achieving this scale will be very challenging, as I say, but I think we're starting from a good position. Increasing the workforce footprint can, to some extent, be supported through an industry transition, with many of the core skill sets that we'll need already existing within the construction sector. Plumbing and heating engineers, for example, have many of the skills required to install zero-emissions heating technologies and connect properties to heat network infrastructure. And similarly, the Federation of Master Builders have highlighted last year in their Building on Our Strengths report that the repair, maintenance and improvement workforce have many of the skills and knowledge of buildings that's required to support energy efficiency improvements and improvements to building fabric. This upskilling that's required here can be supported by relatively short and inexpensive training courses, and indeed the Energy Skills Partnership and the likes of BESS, Construction Scotland Innovation Centre, have led a significant amount of work and investment to ensure that Scotland's colleges and other facilities are prepared to deliver the training that's necessary. There's more to do here, but I think we're starting to make good progress. However, we have to acknowledge that many of the trades that we're talking about here are facing demographic declines, and the pace of deployment that's required calls for a larger workforce than upskilling alone can deliver. So that will necessitate net growth across a number of the key segments in the supply chain. And that means attracting more young people into key professions, but also casting a wider net across society and crucially working with sector skills bodies to consider creative routes to entry. We're working on these issues now through our Climate Emergency Skills Action Plan decarbonisation subgroup that's chaired by Steve Petrie and will be reporting in the coming months. But it's not just all about numbers and numbers of people in the workforce. There's a number of other areas where we need to drive change. Companies will need to adapt to the increased length of time that's required to deliver more complex zero-emissions heating technologies in comparison to the comparatively simple like-for-like replacement of fossil fuel heating systems. Companies will also need to develop new ways of working to support increased cooperation and coordination between different trades. And these changes will be absolutely vital to ensure that the supply chain offers competitive and attractive propositions for consumers which streamline the transition and minimise disruption. The construction sector will also need to develop a more inclusive culture in order to support access to a wider pool of labour, supporting equality and diversity outcomes, and achieving greater buy-in that's required from operatives across the sector, recognising that, perhaps understandably, many are currently sceptical of new technologies and practices. And in terms of innovation, whilst many of the technologies that are required are already well established in the market, I think there is scope here for continued product development to support increased efficiency, improve compatibility with the Scottish building stock, drive down costs and improve those consumer outcomes. I think this is particularly exciting because it opens up a space for Scotland to develop comparative advantage within the supply chain. Sorry, I'll just pretend that you read those last three bullets there whilst I was talking. So, how are we taking action? We've committed to publish a heat and buildings supply chain delivery plan later this year, and we think it's important to see the supply chain development challenge as a market development challenge, recognising that we need to build confidence and awareness in a way that supports businesses to invest in their future. A lot of this is about supporting the supply chain to push forward through support for research, development and innovation, support for skills and training, and helping to test new business models. But we recognise that ultimately suppliers want to see demand for their services, so we're also considering market pull factors focused on translating our £1.8 billion investment this Parliament into clear and meaningful signals for the supply chain to mobilise. So raising awareness, looking at how we distribute subsidies and incentives, but also how we use public procurement as a key driver on that, and the work that Kelly and colleagues in Scotland Excel have done in this space is really important. Finally, though, we know that government simply can't do this alone, and we need to take steps forward in tandem with the industry and key anchor segments of the market. Therefore, we're keen to work with external partners as part of a strong collaborative framework, building on the work that we've done recently with our heat pump sector deal expert advisory group. We'll be setting out further detail on these themes later this year, and we look forward to working with many of you who are here today. So I think I've probably spoken for long enough, and I don't want to take up any more of your time. I'll leave you with a note on our planned next steps and my contact details for anyone that wants to discuss any of these issues with me further, and thank you.